Screen time to dream time fam, welcome back. So in our previous episode we discussed about what's the reason behind we can't stop scrolling. I mean there has to be some reason because we all are always kind of like constantly scrolling, mindlessly scrolling. Then we got to know about Zeigarnik effect, and it is kind of like one of the factor contributing to this why can't I stop scrolling. And we got to know that Zeigarnik effect kind of like because of this our brain kind of like tricks us thinking into that, you know what, this is something which is incomplete and I have to complete this task, and then it kind of like becomes a loophole, it becomes a circle. We are stuck in that and we don't know how to get out from that loophole, out from that circle, and then it kind of like becomes way too much hard. So yeah, and then we kind of like discussed about some solutions, but I just wanted to say that this is going to be our last episode of this podcast. I know it's pretty sad, but don't worry, it's going to be the last episode for this podcast for this year. So I think this year was full of adventures and full of happiness. So yeah, it was pretty nice year. So, but yeah, let's go back to our topic. I feel like today we are kind of like talking about something that's really important, but at the same time, it kind of like a little scary also. And today we are talking about the secret of our phone. How it's controlling your brain. So I mean, how does our phone controls our brain, and what's kind of like the neuroscience behind mobile obsession? So yeah, that's what we are going to talk today. So let's dive into the world of neuroscience. You know, when we are feeling stressed or anxious, our brain releases a hormone called cortisol. Cortisol is like a fire alarm that goes off in our brain, telling us to wake up and respond to the threat. But here's the thing. Our brains are wired to respond to threats, not just kind of like physical threats, but also emotional and psychological threats. And that's where our phone come in. Think of mobile phone like a ticking timing bomb. I know. So I think every notification, every text message, every social media update, it's kind of like that little stressor that triggers our brain stress response. So just kind of like a little GK, that general knowledge that the word cortisol was first kind of like discovered by an American biochemist, Mr. Edward Kelvin Kendall in 1930s. Mr. Kendall isolated cortisol from the adrenaline gland and discovered its role in our kind of like body's stress response. And by the way, have you ever heard of the term allostatic load? So allostatic load refers to the cumulative burden of chronic stress on our bodies. It's like our brain is constantly saying, oh no, I have got to check this. I have got to respond to that. And before we know it, we are stuck in this cycle of constantly checking and responding. Please think of a kind of like, we need to think that when something kind of like, you know, we got a message, notification, anything like that, and the second before we know it, we are kind of like just stuck in that loophole, in that cycle that, oh, now I have to check, now I have to respond, check, respond, check, respond. So yeah. And also, Mr. Michael Harris, he says in his book, the name of that book is The End of Absence. So he says that our phones are like a constant companion which are always there, always demanding for our attention, and that's exactly what's happening here. Our phones are constantly triggering our brain's stress and response, making us feel more anxious and on the edge. So what's driving this constant need to check our phone? Well, it all starts with tiny little almond-shaped structure in our brain called the amygdala. So the amygdala, it's like kind of like the brain's threat detector. It's kind of like constantly scanning our environment for potential threats, and when it detects one, it sends out a stress signal to rest of the brain. Now here's the little GK that the term amygdala comes from Greek word amygdalae, which means almond. So the amygdala was first discovered by French neurologist Mr. Paul Broca in the 19th century. Now here's the thing. The amygdala can't tell you the difference between a real threat and a perceived threat. So when we are scrolling through our phones, we see a notification or a text message, our amygdala goes into overdrive thinking, oh no, this is an emergency. I have got to respond to this right now. As Miss Sherry Turkle says in her book, Reclaiming Conversations, she says that we are constantly connected, yet we are feeling more alone than ever. And that's exactly what's happening here. Our phones are constantly triggering our amygdala, making us feel anxious and on the edge. So, how do we break this cycle of constant checking and responding? So, well, it's all start with understanding of the power of habit. I think that habits are like automatic programs that run in the background of our brains. They are triggered by specific cues, and once they are triggered, they can be hard to stop. So think of it like this, that you are driving a car. When you first learn how to drive, you have to consciously think about every step of the process. But after a while, driving becomes automatic and you don't even think about it anymore. So it's the same with our mobile phone habits. We get into this automatic mode where we are constantly checking and responding without even thinking about it. But here's the thing, here's the catch, that habits can be changed. Yes, habits can be changed. And that's what we are going to talk about next. So, how do we change our habits? Well, it all starts with becoming more aware of our behavior. I feel like the first step which we have to take here is to firstly we need to understand that habits can be changed, and the second we understood this thing, we have to kind of like become a little more aware of our behavior. You can also think of it like losing weight. You cannot lose weight magically without changing your behavior. You have to become more aware of what you are eating, how much you are eating, how much you are exercising, and make conscious choices to change your behavior. And that's how you can lose weight. So it's same with our mobile phones. We have to become more aware of when we are reaching for our phones, why we are reaching for our phones, and make conscious choice to change our behavior. One strategy which can help you is called habit stacking. Habit stacking is where you take an exciting habit and stack a new habit on top of it. For example, let's say you have a habit of checking your phone every time you wake up in the morning. You should stack a new habit on the top of that, like meditating for 5 minutes or journaling for 10 minutes. Or you can also do, I think what I really do, the second I wake up, I kind of like practice gratitude. I'm saying thank you Bhagwanji for everything, and so the first thing I do in the morning is gratitude. So you can kind of like do whatso you want, like maybe you can meditate, you can do journaling, you can say thank you, being grateful. So yeah, by stacking new habit on top of existing ones, we can start to change our behavior and break the cycle of constant checking and responding. So yeah, that's it for today's episode on the neuroscience of mobile obsession, or how our brain is how our mobile is controlling our brain. So I hope you learned something new and valuable about why we are so drawn to our mobile phones, and the reason is constant checking and responding. Remember that our phones are like that one friend who always needs attention, but sometimes you just need to put them on silent mode. As Daniel Seberg says in his book, that in the Digital Diet, that we need to take control of our technology rather than letting it control us. And that's exactly what we need to do. So, as we are heading into a new year, let's control our technology. Let's put our phones on silent mode and start living in the moment. Start living in the present moment and start living a little more mindfully also. So, yeah, send this episode to a friend or family member who really needs to hear this. And so, thank you so much for tuning in. And I'll catch you guys next year